The Baldwin County Public School System, considered one of the finest educational environments in the entire state of Alabama, has a history beginning in the latter part of the 18th century, when, as records indicate, Alabama's first public schoolhouse was built in the North Baldwin County community of Tensaw in 1799. And at that time, nearly 10 years prior to Baldwin being organized as a county, the area remained geographically expanse. Agriculture served as king, and family farms dotted every section of the county. And in this era of extremely limited highway systems, individual communities built their own respective public schoolhouses, with the Board of Education supplying teachers to provide instruction. In the early part of the 20th century, the Baldwin County Public School System boasted over 80 separate school districts, each with their own individual public schoolhouse. And as time progressed, marked with improvements in transportation and engineering, numerous school districts were consolidated into nearby areas, leaving us today with very few of the original and historic public schoolhouses which distinguished Baldwin County, beginning in 1799, as the birthplace of Alabama's first public schoolhouse. This documentary, commissioned by the Honorable County Commissioners of Baldwin County and honorable members of the Baldwin County Board of Education, seeks to illuminate these few remaining and historic original public schoolhouses in an effort to pay tribute to one of the finest public school systems in Alabama. Nestled among the majestic live oak trees in the northern unincorporated community of Point Clear and directly south of the city of Fairhope, the Anna T. Jeans School on Twin Beach Road was an impressive former educational institution established for minority children in the early to mid-20th century. The community school provided a place for young students to learn and accomplish the academic staples of reading and writing in this expanse area of Baldwin County. Initially established with the benevolent financial assistance provided by Anna T. Jeans, a wealthy Quaker from Philadelphia who set aside $1 million to establish a fund to maintain and assist rural schools in the southern American states, the site continues to provide educational enlightenment today as the Baldwin County Alternative School. Today, this historic educational site serves as an active educational institution in Baldwin County, one which would not have been possible without the benevolent gift from Anna T. Jeans, whose selfless financial conveyance, in a time much changed from today, secured this beautiful property for the continued pursuit of educational enlightenment for all Baldwin County's children.
The Anna T. Jeans schools began at the turn of the 20th century when Anna T. Jeans, a Quaker from Philadelphia, gave $1 million to fund and provide an educational program to black students in the rural areas of the South. The foundation she helped to begin was set up as the Negro Rural School Fund, which lasted until 1936. The monies in the fund were invested in secure government bonds. Unfortunately, it was the Great Depression. It was a time of very fiscal shortfall. And so when interest rates fell in the 1930s, rural schools had to depend on other foundations, both federal and private, to supplement their income. Early conditions for blacks in their schools were deplorable. Schools were in poor physical condition, if they existed at all. Black teachers were paid less than whites, and they had little education and had very little opportunity for education. Thus, Jeans supervisors came onto the scene to assist them. Jeans supervisors were primarily black. The teachers in black schools were primarily black women. And the reason being that white communities felt less threatened by female black teachers. They were able to reach a community that male blacks probably wouldn't have been allowed to reach. Initially, Jeans teachers had to teach in one-room schoolhouses, or they held classes in churches. School only lasted around 7 months a year due to the help needed during harvest in the fall and planting in the spring. And the focus early on was on vocational education and improving the school facilities. Later, Jeans programs expanded and taught a more liberal arts program to produce a more well-rounded student. Jeans supervisors and teachers had to assume multiple duties to ensure student education and to raise funds to maintain the school. They enacted on programs that actually funded the school buildings themselves. By 1914, there were somewhere around 120 genes teachers throughout the South. That number had risen to 510 by 1952. But as desegregation became a reality in the 1960s, the genes programs began to fade away when whites and blacks came together in the same school buildings.
The history of the African American education in Baldwin County is one of the most remarkable pieces of Baldwin County history. Throughout the county, communities built schools with their own sweat and blood and hard work to serve the children of their community. And the African American families, children of former slaves, were indeed a part of that movement. The first recorded history that we have of an official school in Baldwin County is the Baldwin County Training School, which was actually formed in 1889 by Reverend Bracy and the Missionary Baptist Association. Founded the school as a mission and an outreach to serve the African American children on the Eastern Shore and indeed all of Baldwin County. And until 1950, it was a boarding school, and students from all over Baldwin County were bused there and lived in dorms there on campus. One of the feeder schools for Baldwin County Training School was the Anna T. Jean School in Fairhope, which is in the Twin Beach community. Anna T. Jeans was a philanthropist from Philadelphia who started a fund to build schools for southern rural black communities. And Baldwin County, under the leadership of Miss Elmore, who was the Jeans teacher for Baldwin County, 14 schools were built. Now, Miss Elmore, who was the Jeans teacher paid for from the Jeans Fund, was one of the most beloved figures in Baldwin County history. And she would visit all 14 of the sites that were Rosenwald-funded sites to encourage the teachers and to help lead the teachers in their curriculum. The Anna T. Jean School, built on Twin Beach Road in the south part of Fairhope, was built to serve the students of that area. And it was first, the students there were first housed in a local home and a friendship hall before they were moved to the school there. After the children went to school through the 8th grade, they did go to Baldwin County Training School for high school.
And I came across it by accident because I was doing research on education of blacks in the South. And I decided to put in, and this is like database searching, and put in Anna T. Jeans. And she was a Quaker philanthropist from Philadelphia. And she was very concerned about the poor quality of education for blacks in the South. And I don't know when she met Booker T. Washington, but somehow they became friends. So according to the information online, he encouraged her to donate or to fund schools. So I could not find any other schools from Georgia, Mississippi, or Alabama except for this one that's named Anna T. Jeans. You know, but there's an Anna T. Jean Fund, or it's also known as a Negro Foundation Fund too. And I think she put up like $1 million to fund schools throughout the South for blacks. And because white superintendents of schools were not interested in educating blacks, they had what they call Jeans supervisors or superintendents to oversee these schools. It's not a lot written about them, but you know, there's some correspondence like letters. So that's when you get into archives and like the manuscript division, because families donate letters, maybe the state archives of Alabama or state university libraries. You know, hopefully they would still have some of that information that you can find at the Library of Congress. But there are a few books on her endeavors and the results. I could not find any history of actually when this school started under Anna T. Jeans School. But it was very interesting that, you know, it was named after her and how we, because as a result, we were educated because of her. I think I started Anna T. Jean School in 1951, first grade. At the time, the first, second, and third grade was in a building located across the street. I can't remember the exact name. I don't even think it had a street name. And I want to say 53 maybe. That building burned down, and we went to classrooms in a Masonic hall right on Twin Beach Road. And then in the fourth grade, came over to this campus. This was considered the main campus, and graduated in ninth grade here. What I remember most about going to Anna T. Jean School is the teachers, and a lot of wonderful times here. They prepared us very well going on towards high school and college, and a lot of activities. We had May Day every year. Each class got together and they would do fundraisers. And I remember getting permission from the principal and the lady who was in charge of the cafeteria to allow us to cook and sell like hot dogs to raise money for Mayday Queen. And just the friendships that I forged here. And I still see a lot of my old teachers and a lot of my friends from first grade on and graduating from high school. It was just a great experience. And I think I remember the bathrooms being in the field behind the main building. We didn't have indoor bathrooms, and I want to say the heat was by cold. I can't see how that's just standing out in my mind. It was a small, we didn't have a lab. We didn't have language classes, but we had excellent teachers, and we all wanted to learn. We had to learn. We could not disobey because a lot of teachers were related, and everybody knew everybody in this community. And so if you did something, the teachers had carte blanche to give you a spanking. I don't want to say beating. And then when you got home, you got another one for acting up. So, but it was just a great, great experience, and just being back on this campus brings back a lot of wonderful memories for me. I received beatings because I talked, not so much because I didn't do my homework. I was bit by a dog in 7th grade and had to have a tetanus shot. And I remember coming to class, didn't know that Mr. Borkin had said no talking. And when I walked in the classroom, the kids all asked me questions and about being bit and the shots and did it hurt. And Mr. Borkin looks out of his window. The building, I don't know if that building is still standing there, where the office used to be, it's gone. It was 2 rooms, separate building where housed the office and our library. Very small library. And he called me, he said, "Young, come in the office." He said, I said, "No talking." I said, "But I just got here, you know." And he says, "Well, hold out your hand." And at that time, they were allowed to beat. Like I said, I don't really want to use the term beat, but we held out our hand, and he had one of those razor straps, and you got 10 licks. So that really hurt my feelings because I realized he didn't beat the other kids, and they were talking too. So I proceeded to inform him, and so he decided to tell my grandmother that I sassed him out. So. But I just love the teachers. Because being from Anna T. Jean, to me, not only about the camaraderie and the friendship you build with the students, but to me, and I always share it wherever I go, is the teachers that I had here at Anna T. Jean School. I just get kind of misty thinking about them because they were wonderful and excellent teachers. You know, and I just wish that we could have recognized, because some are not here now, you know, and let them know how much at least I appreciate them. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a Choctaw Indian, and He looked white, and I didn't know at the time that he was hired as like a janitor. And I arrived to class one day, 6th grade, and the students met me and said, we need to sign a petition. Mr. Borkin has hired a white man to be the janitor, and we think he should have hired a black man. And so I'm all for this, so I'm rushing out, you know, let's get the petition signed and sign our names, and ran smack into my grandfather. And I just said, Papa, and he picked me up, and the kids are looking at me saying, what is going on here? And I said, this is my grandfather. So that was funny. One day I decided in the 3rd grade, and never do something like that when the teacher is your cousin and it's good friends with your grandmother. I decided I was not going to pay for lunch. I think milk was like a nickel and lunch was 25 cents. So I decided to treat all my friends to ice cream and popsicles. Unfortunately, my cousin, Mrs. Carter, Willie Carter, was teaching 3rd grade, and we bought the popsicles from her. So I sent one of my classmates with the money in to buy the popsicles. Well, early that morning, I told her I didn't get lunch money or milk money. And so the friend told where she had received the money from, said, well, Thelma gave me the money. She's going to treat all of us to popsicles. Well, she told my grandmother, and when I got home, I got a beating. So, you know, not so much for wanting to treat them, but the fact that I lied. So that taught me a lesson, you know, a very valuable lesson. So it was just great memories here. You know, we had a lot of activities. We didn't have a gym. There was no organized, like, sports like kids have now, but we played volleyball, we played kickball, we had softball. I could not play softball. I've always been interested in reading about sports and looking at sports, so no one would ever select me to play on the team. But Mrs. Bosby, who was in charge at that time, would make them select me, but I wasn't interested. I just wanted to keep score, you know. But so I get teased about that still today, you know, that I couldn't play softball. So, but like I said, it was great experiences, and I wouldn't trade it. Even though it was segregated, I think somehow it made my life richer and made you want to strive maybe even more. And the teachers really taught great basic classes. We knew about Chaucer, we knew about Shakespeare, you know, we knew about poetry. We had poetry on Fridays. We had great math teachers. So, I mean, you might have missed a lot if you're going to the integrated school, you know, having language lab and all that. But I think, for me personally, that going to a segregated school, because the teachers could concentrate on us, and it just really made my life richer and to appreciate a lot of things.
When I received my appointment as a teacher in Baldwin County, I was surprised to know that I had been assigned to the Anna T. Jean School in Fairhope, and that I would not have to drive very far, because at that time I was living in Fairhope. It was an interesting and exciting experience because there was so much that I did not know that I learned that year. I really learned how to work with many, many children. I only had 44 students in my class that year. And in college, you know, they had encouraged us to use audiovisual equipment, record players, and to help teach. But when I got to the classroom, I bought a record player from home, but there was not an outlet on the wall. We had heaters in the top of the room, and I was determined that I was going to let these children hear some music, because I could not sing, but they needed to have some music. And I would get up, I would hold a student on my shoulder and let him get up to that heater where there was an outlet, to plug that socket in, until one day just a little spark of fire came out. And that was the end of the music for that year. Up until then, it had been really good having the record player there in the room. I did my very best to teach to the best of my ability and manage the children, and at that time we did not have all the different classes that we have now, like special need classes. We just taught everybody, and you just had to figure out a way to manage everybody and teach them as much, take them as far as you could take them. There were some really, really bright children in my class. And then there were some children that didn't learn as quickly as others. But I had to learn to adjust to that and take them, move them along too. And the most interesting thing, or surprising thing, to learn that I had to raise money. And so I had a brand new baby. A baby was 3 months old. And so when I would go home in the afternoon, I had to take care of that baby. And then I had to do brownies and cupcakes so that I could bring it back tomorrow so I could sell it, because I had to have a certain amount of money. And then the person who raised the most above that amount would be, we had a tea, would be queen of the tea. That class would be the queen of the tea. I guess we would call it the queen. But anyway, they would be crowned and all of that. I never made it that far. I never did get to be crowned, but I raised my portion and as much as I could over that. But I just couldn't do as much cooking as some of the others because I had that little baby. And near the end of the year, Mr. McVeigh asked me if I could teach summer school that summer. And I agreed to teach summer school, and it was in Bay Minette. And in that classroom, there was 2 teachers, with a white teacher and a black teacher. And some classes had 2 white teachers, but all the blacks had a white teacher with them. And it worked fine. I had my little group back in the back of the classroom, and she had her little group at the front of the classroom. And we made it through that summer. And evidently, I did okay, because when I got my appointment for the next year, I had been moved uptown to the Fairhope Elementary School, where we were beginning integration. And the children, the black children, could attend that school if they wanted to. So a few black children went uptown to that school, but most of them stayed here at Anna T. Jean because, as the young lady said before, they really loved it. And that was really a part of them. But a few of them wanted to test the water and come up there with us. I went up, and that was in 1969-70. That was that school year that I went up to the Fairhope Elementary School. The next year, they closed Anna T. Jean School, and they had built the new middle school out on Fairhope Avenue, and that's the year we totally integrated. It was 70-71. I can just say that Anna T. Jean School was a very good school. The teachers put forth their very best efforts, but the equipment and material just was not available to Anna T. Jean School as I found available to Fairhope Elementary School when I went there the next year.
I attended the Anna T. Jean School, which was first what you call the primer school at the Williams Working Hall. And down the hill, it was another little school they called the Knights of Pleasure. And then I moved to the Anna T. Jean School. And I attended that in 1940. I graduated in 1948 from the Anna T. Jean School. But during my 8 years of attending Anna T. Jean School, I enjoyed it very much. And I love my teachers. And some of my teachers' names, I can't remember all of them, but I remember Miss Whitty Carter. I remember Miss Lavinia Taylor and Miss Susie Lillard. I liked her. She was a good teacher. She was a little older, but I liked her. And my cousin, she was in the same grade with me, but she was a little bit smaller than me. And it seemed like to me that Miss Susie wanted to hold, her name was Susan, back with me, to keep her back with me. But finally, she moved her on, and she got a chance to get ahead of me. And during my school year, I can remember that if you wanted to, you could work in the kitchen and have free lunch. And sometimes I would work in the kitchen. And I liked that our kitchen help. They were Miss Aretha Williams and Mrs. Hilda Hilser. They was good cafeterias, and they served good dinner. And I enjoyed their dinners. And we had a lot of activities at our school. We played in games with little Santa Walker, and I can remember we used to throw the ball over the schoolhouse and see who could catch it. That was kind of strange. And then we some more games. I think we had at that time a basketball team. I was a member of the basketball team, but I never did. I don't think I made it. I just wore the suit and that was it. They probably didn't want me because I couldn't play too good. But those were good old days at Anna T. Jean School. And you know, another thing, during those years, we had to walk to school. That was kind of fun. We had a dirt road at that time, a muddy clay road. Sometimes we'd get balled up in the clay coming to school. And sometimes we would have little rain gear, galoshes and things like that. But it didn't make no difference. We walked to school and we enjoyed every bit of it. And I would take nothing for the old Anna T. Jean School because that is where I got my start and my beginning. And I shall always remember it and keep it in the heart. In my classroom, that was me and my friend Helen. And we used to talk a lot. And I used to talk fast and she did too. And I think Miss Taylor, Lavinia Taylor, gave me the name of a Polly. She said, y'all need to shut up all that talking. You sound like a little Polly. And instead of them giving my friend the nickname Polly, they named me Polly. And some of them still now call me Polly. And that was funny. And I didn't like that too good. That was kind of funny. When I graduated from the 8th grade, we had a ceremony. We surely did. I forgot that. And that's one of the most important things. I had my cap and my gown. As a matter of fact, I have my picture of when I graduated from the 8th grade. And we also had invitation too. We went to the church and for commencement, and then we went to, was at the school. And that was in 48. And I remember on my diploma, I think I was served as the secretary. I think Herbert Mitchell was the president. And those are one of the things that I'm proud of. I still sometimes look at my picture that's hanging in my den of when I graduated from the 8th grade at Anna T. Jean School.
I remember Anna T. Jean as a neighborhood school, and when the phrase "it takes a village" comes into play, because anything that occurred at school, by the time you got home, your parents knew about it, and the neighbors on the way. So my first experience was in the 1st grade, and we were located in a separate area than the main campus here. And the teachers would have to come over here for conferences, and they would leave an upperclassman to supervise us. And if we talked, they were supposed to take our names and give it to the teachers when they came back. And I was always an introvert, never really said anything, so if the teacher said, don't talk, I didn't talk. And the upperclassman took my name. So that means that when the teacher got back, you would get 1 or 2 pops in your hand, we would call it. And I refused to let her pop me because I didn't talk. So my aunt was the head of the cafeteria, Mrs. Hilda Hilson at that particular time. So she told her that I was being naughty. And of course, my parents knew about it when I got home. So I explained the situation to them, and I told them that I refused to talk, and I refused to get a spanking for something that I did not do. So at the time I realized, well, later on in the years, I realized that that was my first time of being a protester and a radical. Good experience, a happy experiences at the school. We used to have our principal, Mr. Alvin E. Boykin, would put on dances for us, and we would have talent shows. And the parents would bake cakes and make cookies, and we would sell those, and we would take the money from the sale of those goodies and go and buy records, 45s. And then we would have our weekly, every Friday night, a dance. Once a year we would have May Day, and I guess that was our fundraiser. And the kids, the younger kids would wrap the maypoles, and you would have the May Day king and queen, and you'd have all kinds of activities. We'd have track meets, you'd have basketball, you would have tug of wars, anything that bobbing for apples, any type of fun. The most sad experience I had was when I was in the 4th grade, and it was at the beginning of the school year. And we got books. And you would pass out a book, and I guess you would keep it for the school year, and then you would turn it back in at the end of the school year. And then it was that year when I realized there was writing in the book. So I went up to my teacher and I asked her, I said, why is there writing in the book? It's supposed to be a new book. And she said, no, these are books, and we call it hand-me-downs. These were books that were used by other schools. And when they get new books, then they hand us down these books. And then I realized that the information in them were not up to date. And I started crying. And she took me to the office and explained the situation to the principal. And he tried to explain to me why we got the books that we got. But it just didn't soak in. And it was just a sad thing through my whole school education. On a more happy occasion, the teachers were your teachers, but they were also your friends, and sometimes they had to be your parents. We used to have a little nursery school across the street, and one of my favorite teachers, if you could say that, was a Mrs. Irene Washington, and she was a 5th grade teacher, and she had a little boy who was nursery school age, and he was under the weather. So it was my responsibility at lunchtime. She got permission for me to take the medication across the street, give it to him, and come back. So that was my first experience of, I guess, being a supervisor doing something independently of someone else. And I just remember that experience. It's menial to other people, but that experience just stays with me forever. I went on to high school, but this has always been a school that will never leave my heart. It's Anna T. Jeans. And we were just trying to figure out how we could just get some of the people that participated, attended this school to come back for a reunion. And it's so sad that our beloved principal is gone, but he will always have a place in my heart.
It was very interesting. I was not, my classroom was not in the main portion of the school. We had a hall. The school did not provide enough room for all the classes, so two of us taught in separate places. I taught first grade, and believe it or not, some of the students I taught then I'm associated with right now. It was very interesting. I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed the children. They were very cooperative. We used to get out and play together at recess time, and I really did enjoy it. When I left here, I was sent to Baldwin County Training School, and I worked there for the remainder of my, not quite the remainder, until about 1970 when I was moved to Fairhope High School. During the time that we were attending school, it wasn't exactly like today's, but we did have different things to help us learn to live in the other world. We did not have physical education, but during the recess period, we would play ball and play games. We had arts and crafts, and every year we would have a fair, and our work would be on display. We made things out of pine straw and raffia. We sewed. The principal's wife taught sewing and embroidery. And we made things like that, and we put them on display at the end of during the year, the school year. So it was very educational for the children, because we were just not studying just books all the time. That's about, when I was teaching here, of course, as I said before, it was a very good experience because the children were very cooperative and they enjoyed being with me and I enjoyed being with them.
I started school at Anna T. Jean in 1941. I finished in 1950. These were very good years. I have a lot of love and respect for the teachers that we had, although we didn't have that much up-to-date material. When I went to school, I didn't even have Alabama history, but they had it in the white schools. So like Paulette said, we got the leftovers, but we didn't get any leftover Alabama history books. We had plenty of physical education. When Mr. Barkins came, the first principal that I remember was Mr. Anderson, and he was from Bay Minette. Mr. Barkins was also from Bay Minette, but he resided just down the street. His wife still lives there. He was a military man, and he was really strict, but he was nice. And he made sure we had all the activities, physically as well as our mental aspects of education. I played basketball for quite a few years, and I was a fat kid. So when they ordered the uniforms, they didn't have one to fit me. So he sewed and made my uniform. It was green satin. And I think I might have a picture somewhere of that. Anyway, I just remember that, and everybody just loved him to death. His birthday was like the 14th of February, Valentine's Day, and we always tried to do something real special for him. Mrs. Barkin, who still resides just down the street, she was a I guess she was the arts and craft teacher when I went to school here. And she taught us how to sew. And as Miss Hobbs stated, we made baskets out of straw. We just go out there under a pine tree, pick up some straw. And I don't know where they bought the raffia from, but we would use the raffia, and we made baskets. And we did have a special day, May Day, where we twined the maypole. And I'm sure none of you all know anything about a maypole. But that was a real fun thing. Each person would have a string, and you had to go in a certain order to plait that around that pole. And it was a beautiful sight when it was finished, if it was done right. My mother worked in the cafeteria system for the Baldwin County school system for 26 years. She started down at the Point Cliff School, but she ended up here and retired from here. And everybody used to talk about her good meals, because she wasn't here when I went to school. She was at Point Cliff. We had good home-cooked food, and my cafeteria manager was Mrs. Mabel Denton. We would have little salmon balls. Oh, that was the best thing going. And we would have yellow grits. You ever had yellow grits? It's so good. And tomato gravy and hot biscuits. That would be a lunch. And I guess it was so good, that's probably the only one that I can remember. We would have chicken, fish, you know, certain things at certain times, but that just stuck with me. And I've been trying to make those salmon balls ever since and can't seem to get them done. So I just have quite a few fond memories of Miss Susie Little. She taught me in 3rd grade, I believe. And she was a lady that when she said hush, she meant it. She'd pick up a piece of wood and throw it across the classroom to get your attention. But she wouldn't hit you with it. And who else? Oh, Miss Vera Denton, who's passed on, was a good teacher. Mrs. Ida Hope, who still resides in Mobile, was a teacher of mine. And the year that I finished the 8th grade here at the original building of the brick building, they added the 9th grade. So I was able to also attend the 9th grade here. And then when I finished the 9th grade, we went to Daphne for 3 years for high school. I know I would always have my lesson, and the kids would say, "Did you get that assignment?" I said, I didn't get it. But I always had my lesson. But I wasn't going to let them copy off of me. So it was just good times at Anna T. Jean's.
The earliest records that Baldwin County schools have about a school serving the African American community in Loxley called Ellisville is a wooden building that stood in the Ellisville community. Now, most likely, that school was one of the Julius T. Rosenwald schools that were built in Baldwin County. Julius T. Rosenwald was the president of Sears, and he began a national movement to build schools for children of former slaves in the South. And Baldwin County was home to 14 Rosenwald schools. Now, of those 14 schools built in the early part of the 20th century, the architecture was approved by Tuskegee Institute, and the funds came from the Rosenwald Fund. The Ellisville wooden building stood in the Ellisville community and served students there until it was used as a part of the new school that was built in the late 40s and early 50s. The new building, which is still existing today, was built of Clay City tile and was built to accommodate the boom in population that occurred right at the end of World War II. The building itself was the architecture that featured all doors opening to the outside, with a separate building serving as the cafeteria. And one of the classrooms was doubled as a stage area, a little auditorium. That auditorium became the center of many, many community events in Ellisville. And alumni and residents of the community tell us about their memories of the box suppers there, the socials, the political gatherings that were held there, and most especially the silver teas that became the annual event of the Ellisville community. Many alumni also fondly remember the vegetable garden that was in the back of the school. And especially under the leadership of Principal John Hobbs, students and community members alike worked in that garden in order to put food in the cafeteria to serve the students there in the school. The community itself of Ellisville is a very settled, consistent community with outstanding family values, which put education at the top of the list. The school itself was consolidated with Loxley Elementary at the onset of integration in the late 1960s. And not long after that, it became used as a Head Start Center and is today maintained as a beautiful center of education in the community.
Ellisville School in my time was the black school east of Loxley. And as I recall, it was constructed of Clay City tile. Rather nice little structure. Had one of its classrooms was was used as a cafeteria and served the community of Ellisville, which was an unincorporated, and I'm not sure that is an official name. But there was an Ellis family down there, and the community came to be called Ellisville, and the school was generally known as Ellisville. It had 9 grades when I first knew it.
Yes, I remember going to attending Ellisville School in the first grade. Miss Morgan was my teacher, and it was a good school, very good school. It was very informative. I guess like now, you know, when I think back to the times that I went there and stuff, you know, it was some of the best days of my life, attending a school such as that magnitude. The kids were all great, my classmates, teachers, excellent teachers. Of course, the building was old, big. We just had fun days attending there. I was one of those students who just kind of went to school. I went to school to learn. I was there. Maybe a fight or two with kids, stuff, you know, may not fight, but just play fighting, I guess. It was nothing major. But just to be there and to be with everyone, because we all grew up in the same community. You know, we all knew each other. You know, we attended school, we worked together, played together, fought each other sometimes. we just had some good days there. Well, my classroom, we were in a big wooden building. And I remember, especially on rainy days, well, we had to walk to school. So on rainy days, we got wet, went in class, we dried off, and just had school. It wasn't a big deal, that was just part of going to school. These days, kids have buses, and they get upset walking, if they had to walk around the block. But I walked about 1.5 miles every day to school, so, and home, so it wasn't a problem. PE went out and played, of course, football. We had a lot of organized activities: football, played basketball. We didn't have soccer then, but we played basketball, football, those type things. There, we go out someday and shoot marbles. I remember shooting marbles in the sand. Those type things, stuff we did. I was pretty good at shooting marbles and stuff. I had a classmate, Robert Rudolph. I don't know if he's dead now or not, but Robert and I, we were probably the best 2 marble shooters in the whole school. We just kind of, I do remember breaking other kids for marbles and stuff, It wasn't gambling. It was just fun. Well, in playing marbles, that was a game to where you would, you would have these little round things, like little, I guess, like small miniature golf balls, I guess, just for those of you if you don't know what marbles are. And what you would do is that the object of the game was to knock another person's marble out of the ring or box or whatever. And when you knocked it out, that marble became yours. So you collect the marbles, and it was a good game. I didn't play jacks. Most of the girls play jacks. You would see the girls playing jacks at lunchtime, PE, those type things.
I came in as a substitute for Mrs. Mary Jane Allen, who was on maternity leave, and I worked with 1st and 2nd grades. And of course that was a good experience. You had babies, so to speak. And then you always had parents who cared, and they were very interested in what their children were doing and how they were progressing and what have you. And they were always coming to visit occasionally whenever they weren't working. And they would come by sometime and bring little goodies for them and for their teachers. And after that time, I was carried on to another school. And then I came back here and worked for a while with my, had 3 daughters, and one was in school at Daphne. And the twins were much younger, and they stayed right in the community up there with one of the Cohens, who was a relative of the Ellis. And they would be there with him until I got ready to go home in the afternoons. But then this was a community-oriented place, and the church and the school worked hand in hand trying to do things. They would have what they would call silver tea to raise funds to get supplies and things that they thought that we needed. And as teachers, we would spend much of our own money, as little as we were getting, to get things for the kids, to get supplies, to give them little gifts and things for doing well. And I think that was very important too. It just brought a close-knit community together. We had a community meeting, a club called Loxley United Council, and we met here twice a month. We had all type of little activities over here, and they had little style shows and what have you, talent shows and all. And they had, sometimes they'd have what they call social things like box suppers, and they would come over some Saturdays and they would have an all-day field day or whatever, and they would sell stuff like fish sandwiches and plates of food and whatever. That was also something that was done in connection with the church that was right next door. The silver teas were usually done in connection with the church as well. You go into that main auditorium, and have one long table down the center. They put the tables together, and they would have these decorative cloths on them, and they would have chairs over near the wall, and they would have a small program or a short program welcoming people in, and people from everywhere would come. A lot of if it was a year for election, the politicians would be here and they would speak, they would leave their little donations and what have you. And different persons were called hostesses, and they would work to try to outdo the other one, raising finances. And it was always a great experience. I mean, people just like to have something to go to, you know, to do something with their time, because there's not a lot of things to do around here. Children here at this school went through grades, well, they had what they call primer, and that was the one, I guess, that you would call preschool now, but you had primer, and they would go through from primer through grade 7, and then they were transferred to Daphne, to Baldwin County Training School. And that's where we would come in contact with all of these folk from Loxley. After that, we look forward to it every year. But we always looked forward to having them join us too. I think they were glad to get there as well. Life in the old school was fine. Everybody seemed to care for each other, and if there was a problem, everyone seemed like they would become involved in trying to solve it or whatever. We've had very few fights, because kids then knew that if parents found out something that they had done at school, they were going to get punished for it too when they get home. So things were pretty well in control. It was nice. And occasionally, when after a recess, kids may come in for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and they would just kind of put their head down on the desk and kind of relax. And then get up, somebody would say, "It's time for us to get up, we got to do something." So it was really a nice thing. It really was.
John Hobbs was a most remarkable man. He left home with absolutely nothing and went to Tuskegee and vowed not to come home until he had an education. And that happened. He simply left home and never came back until he had an education. And he came back and he used it for the people in his community. John had a short life, and his life was cut short with a health problem. And we lost a valuable person to Baldwin County education when John died. One of the memories I have of John Hobbs is his preservation of excess vegetables that he gleaned from the nearby farms. He did it for his school, and he did it personally. He went into the fields and he pulled up the turnips, and he personally cut them up in little pieces and stuffed them in little big plastic bags and put them in deep freezers in his school cafeteria, and made a tremendous food contribution to the kids of his community. John Hobbs didn't have a lazy bone in his body. He worked when other people were sleeping. Oh, I remember an occasion when somebody kicked in a screen door one night, screen door to the cafeteria. He was inebriated, he was a member of the community, but worse than that, he was a school bus driver. And I felt, under the circumstances, that I had to fire him. And John Hobbs said, "Leave it to me, I'll take care of it." And he took care of it. The man was fired. I didn't have to handle it.
As a second grade teacher of the former Ellisville Elementary School. It was short and pleasant. I met a lot of the parents and of the students. The students were precious. They were sweet, they were loving, caring, and eager to learn. It was easy to work with them because they were willing to work in any capacity that came before them. As the second grade, I had to teach a lot, and they were happy to accept whatever I tried to do for them. Some of the children that I taught are presently serving in the Baldwin County school system now. From the classes that I have had in the Ellisville school have gone on to be nurses. There are even some politicians, musicians. What else they did? Ministers. And practically every walk of life you can find a student from from Ellisville Elementary School. I went to the hospital 2 days ago, and I met a former student there whom I never would have known. She said, "I remember you." And I said, "Oh." And she told me her name, and I was glad to know that one of my students would be a nurse at the Thomas Hospital, even at today. The cafeteria was a pleasant place for the student. We served. At once, my husband, who's John Hobbs, was the principal. As a matter of fact, this was my first teaching position, and he was my husband was my first principal. So you can imagine what I had to go through then. He was a type of principal that had the children at heart. Everything he did was considered centered around the development and the welfare of the student. And I tried to follow that lead in my working with the student at Ellisville. Even today, I see them and I have forgotten their names and all, but they remember me. They let me know that you were my teacher. Then I have to ask them, "Oh, well, what is your name?" And after they tell me their name, most of the names I can relate to. But it was a pleasant stay there at Ellisville, even though it wasn't that long. But I do think I was able to help someone as I passed that way. The food were prepared in the lunchroom. The children had to leave their classroom, go outside to wash their hands, come back to the lunchroom window, receive their food, and take it back to their classroom to eat. But that was done for a short while. Then we had a cafeteria moved over across the street in a little white building. And that's where the children would go from the classroom across the street to the white building and sit in the cafeteria for lunch. Some of the food that was used in the cafeteria was from the garden that the principal and the student worked themselves. It was at that time 10 months of schooling, and they used the summertime to come out to the school. They had enough property to plant their own garden. So they planted peas, beans, greens, and potatoes. And when the gathering of the food, the children would come and help the principal gather the food. The potatoes were stored for later on in the season, but the beans and greens, the cafeteria manager would come out and gather, prepare the food, and the children got a chance to enjoy, we say, the fruits of their own labor. And they really enjoyed doing that, and they really enjoyed eating the food that they helped to grow and gather to be prepared for their lunch. And during that time, we had a nurse to come out, to call the school nurse, by the name of Miss Clark. And when the children would see Miss Clark enter the campus, they all wanted to give her a hug, and they called her the Lady in White. Anytime the Lady in White came on campus, everybody was happy to see her. She gave them toothpaste and toothbrushes, and they thought that was the best thing that had ever happened to them. Then there were some that after they did the screening, she took some to the dentist and some to the doctor for various reasons. And everybody then wanted to have a turn to go to the doctor with the Lady in White. And I thought that was very pleasant. It was a very pleasant experience for the children. My husband, as a person, was one of the best people that you could meet. He was gentle, he was loving, and he was kind and didn't meet strangers. He treated everybody the same. As a principal, he told me one day that everybody had to carry their load. And if I find any of you all standing out talking and not working with the children, you're going to have to answer to me. So if you don't want to answer to me, you better stay in your room and do what you're supposed to do. He worked very hard. He was a hard worker at everything he did. And he had a lot of experience with working. Well, matter of fact, that was his first position also. He was hired as a principal, a teacher principal, because he had to work with 6th grade students as well as the administrative part. But he worked there, and then when he moved from there, he went to another school in the county. I think his work included about 6 different schools in the county before he passed at the Fairhope High School. But you couldn't find a better person to work with, and he was the kind that will help you in any way that he could. And he was a father, he's a loving father. When I look back at some of the things He didn't, everything he did, he tried to include his children. And he had 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy.